After a superb 5th season, the WB were unable to continue funding the show due to how popular it had become, with the increasing demand for more special effects and actors' wages. The show found new life on UPN and the writers prepared to plan out season 6. The WB were notorious for censorship on particular subjects, so when the writers began to inquire about certain taboo subjects for television, they were shocked at the response. UPN were so delighted to have the show in its lineup that they gave the writers free rein. I'm not kidding, they pretty much just let them do whatever they wanted and say whatever they wanted, and they'd put them on at whatever time. As a result, the show got dark. Yeah, they've done dark storylines before, but I'm talking psychologically draining thoughts and questions raised. Joss Whedon stepped down as showrunner for this season in order to focus his efforts on developing a new show for Fox, and spending his time solely on the musical episode for this season. Out of all these talented writers, Marty Noxon was appointed as new showrunner, with Whedon being a consultant for certain storylines. I do have my problems with Noxon's writing at times, but she's written some great episodes, including my favourite of the entire show, so I'm intrigued. Let's see what this minor reshuffling of the writing team does to spice things up, as this is an episodic analysis of season 6 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The gang are continuing Buffy's nightly patrols as a group along with the Buffybot to help keep up the illusion that the Slayer is still on the Hellmouth so that no demons will try to overrun the town. They're also keeping up appearances for Dawn at Parent-Teacher Day where the Buffybot is sent so that Dawn won't get taken away from them. Willow and Tara have moved into Buffy's house while Xander and Anya still haven't announced their engagement at the end of the last season due to Buffy's death still lingering in the air. Giles still has intentions of leaving to go home to England but never follows through, much to Anya's annoyance, who's been promised the store to herself. Spike is following through on his promise to Buffy to look after Dawn, which he does when the rest of the gang have a meeting at Xander's place. They are planning to resurrect Buffy out of whatever hell dimension she's in, saving her from an eternity of pain so that she can save the world some more. The Urn of Osiris is our last ingredient needed, and they plan to do the ritual the following night. The rest of the gang are anxious about messing with natural order, but Willow is adamant that this is the right thing to do. That same night, the Buffybot gets damaged by a vampire, revealing its mechanical insides, and it tells some members of a demon biker gang who sets their sights on the Hellmouth. Willow, meanwhile, fucking stabs a deer to death, collecting its blood for the ritual. Giles decides to leave, and the gang will give him a wholesome goodbye, although unbeknownst to him, the gang are a bit upset that he's leaving right as they plan on resurrecting Buffy that night. Sure enough, they head to Buffy's grave and commence the ritual, which involves a snake coming out of Willow's mouth. The demon biker gang shows up and damage the Buffybot, who leads them right to the gang, destroying the Urn of Osiris before the spell is properly finished, and they all flee in terror, splitting up. Xander informs Willow that the spell didn't work, but right at that moment, Buffy is resurrected, thankfully reversing the decaying process, and she has to claw her way out of her own grave. The gang meet back up at the magic box while the bikers wreak havoc and wonder what the hell they're going to do as the Buffybot gets completely torn apart, but not before witnessing the real Buffy moments earlier. Spike takes Dawn somewhere more safe, stealing a motorbike from the bikers. They find the Buffybot, which tells Dawn that she saw another version of her, and Dawn just runs off. It's by complete chance Buffy comes across the rest of the gang, who originally believe it to be the Buffybot, but quickly realise from how messed up it is that this is the real deal. The spell worked. Similar to when Angel was brought back and was kind of a mess when he originally returned, Buffy has gone through something similar and helps defend the gang from the bikers who threaten to rape them? Jesus, okay. Tara is quick to kill her first ever demon by axing the leader in the back, while Buffy flees to Glory's Tower, which is just still there from last season. No one tore that shit down yet. She seems like she plans to jump, killing herself in the same way she did previously, but somehow Dawn finds Buffy at the top of the tower, although how she just assumes this is where Buffy would go, or that she's even back at all, and the Buffybot didn't just see its own reflection is quite ridiculous. Buffy asks Dawn if she's in hell, and Dawn is officially the one to tell her that she's not, and is alive once again. The tower begins collapsing, which took long enough, and Buffy saves Dawn from harm as they hug each other. I think the lack of Whedon's involvement needs to be remembered when questioning some of the decisions and choices that the writers went with for this, and one thing I noted during this two-part premiere was that something definitely fell off. I couldn't tell what it was, the acting, the production, or the fact that Giles is absent for 3/4 of the story. Giles has been gone before though, and remember when he left back in Triangle and everything went to shit? Well, this season's going to be a doozy. He will be back in 2 episodes time and stick around for a short while, so he's not gone completely yet. Maybe it's the lack of Buffy in the first part? That might be it. She is resurrected and seems quite disturbed by the world, even asking Dawn if she was in hell, which is alluding to the fact that maybe wherever Buffy wasn't as bad as the gang seemed to think it was. It's cool to see Spike work with the gang again, like near the end of last season. He's still the same wisecracking vampire he's always been.
Oh, poor Watcher. Did your life pass before your eyes? Cup of tea, almost got shagged, cup of tea.
The thing to mention is when the biker gang is tearing up the town, Spike actively mentions to Dawn that he feels like joining in from how fun it looks. The audience tends to forget sometimes that Spike is still evil. He doesn't have a soul, and the only thing stopping him from being a villain is a chip in his head. We'll see plenty of stuff like this in the coming season, so keep that in mind for some of the more questionable story elements. Xander and Anya are the same as they've always been, keeping their engagement under wraps to not come off as trying to take the limelight from Buffy's death. They're still grieving, well, Xander is anyway. Anya doesn't care and gets on to Xander for not telling anyone yet. Tara's grown a lot. She actually kills a demon for the first time, which is a big step in her character character. Willow, however, has gone from great witch that led the gang spectacularly in the final arc of Season 5 to egotistical and overruling as she all but forces the rest of the gang to help her resurrect Buffy. Fair enough, Buffy might be in hell, so let's save her. But what if she isn't? Did that thought never cross any of their minds? Dawn is the one to stop Buffy from jumping at the end of the episode, and I mentioned that Dawn becomes far more irritating this season compared to last. She will get there. Give it time. But I found her quite endearing here. She quotes Buffy's speech to her before she jumped about being strong, and that's a touching moment. I think this premiere is a bit slow for my liking. Obviously it was going to be without Buffy, and sure enough, it is. We spend the first episode preparing to bring Buffy back, and spend the second episode with almost everyone discovering that Buffy is back. But hey, I'm sure things will pick up in the next episode. Buffy's here again. Let's get the show back to the usual formula. This episode sort of acts like a part 3 to bargaining, but since the pace is decreased after the biker gang have been stopped, we reset. Dawn takes Buffy back to the house where she meets Spike.
Seen the bloody bot before? Didn't think she'd patch ups?
I love that he knows. Instantly he knows by looking in her eyes. He cleans her up, but after realising that she clawed out of her own coffin, and when the gang arrive, he quietly slips out. He confronts Xander and Anya for not telling him about the spell, and that something always goes wrong, and that consequences are imminent. Willow calls Giles, who plans to catch the next plane back, and they all head to bed. Willow expresses sadness to Tara that Buffy never thanked her for bringing her back. Meanwhile, Buffy is startled by all the pictures in her room turning to skulls, and Willow and Tara get verbally assaulted by a ghost Buffy at the bottom of their bed. Not just that, but Anya gets possessed too, coming at Xander with a knife. The gang figure out that the spell was brought through not just Buffy, but a hitchhiker demon without form to even the resurrection. They've brought life, so death must come too. They aren't able to send the demon back without sending Buffy back too, and Dawn isn't keen on that idea at all, and rightfully so.
If you think you can give her back to me and then take her away again, no. That's worse than if you never brought her back.
Through more research, Willow finds out that the demon can only live in corporeal form if Buffy is killed.
Thanks for the tip.
Buffy is attacked by the demon, but Willow and Tara rush back to corporealize it so Buffy can kill it. At the end of the episode, Buffy thanks Willow and the gang for bringing her back, which Willow was hoping for. Buffy heads out back where Spike is hiding during a midday stroll due to the sun being up, and Buffy confesses to him that whatever she was after she died wasn't hell. There was no pain or agony, only comfort and a sense of finality.
I don't understand theology or dimensions, but I think I was in heaven.
She tells the dumbstruck Spike that the gang can never know what they did and that they ripped her out of heaven. This feels more like the Buffy I know. I found myself really enjoying this episode. The entire Buffy in Heaven arc fascinates me. It's such a great thing to explore for the character. You know, we've seen what happens when someone is brought back from hell with Angel. Now, the natural progression is bringing a character back from the foretold paradise. Due to this connection she has with death now, and I know she died before, but that was only briefly. She's been dead for months now. Buffy finds that the only person she can truly stand to be around is Spike. He's dead too, after all, although he doesn't have much experience with afterlives. That doesn't matter to Buffy though, she actively visits him during the day just to talk. Damn, Spike's basement is looking like a bachelor pad. He probably stole all that stuff, didn't he? I can see why Willow was a bit miffed that Buffy wasn't grateful at first, since she still thinks she brought Buffy back from hell. Willow's also a bit distracted by how powerful she's getting. She goes all black-eyed again during the climax of the episode, and Spike also expresses worry that she's getting a bit too big for the boots magic-wise. Bringing a hitchhiker demon back as a way to have the gang pay for messing with life and death is a cool touch, but if you think these were the consequences that I was talking about earlier, oh good god no. Anyway, let's get Giles back, come on. Buffy discovers it due to Joyce's medical bills and funeral. She's completely broke. This is rubbed in her face when the basement floods and she struggles to cobble up enough money to pay for the repairs. Buffy needs money, and fast.
Start charging. For what? Slaying vampires. I mean, you're providing a valuable service to the whole community. You can't charge innocent people for saving their lives.
Don't have a dig at my boy Angel now. He does his job and he does his job well. Buffy instead goes to the bank to apply for a loan, but her meeting is interrupted by a demon breaking in while the bank is robbed. Buffy deals with the demon but it runs off, but is ultimately still turned down for a loan due to having no income whatsoever. As the gang researches for the race of demon in the books, Anya continues to get frustrated with Xander that he won't tell everyone about their engagement, and since Buffy is back, there's no need for waiting, but he still refuses and tells Anya that he's waiting for the right moment. Dawn helps him with the research and finds a demon that attacked Buffy.
I think it's Fashnik. Like cookies.
The Fashnik demon is busy yelling at the bank robbers since the Slayer is still alive, which wasn't part of their so-called deal, and our bank robbers are... oh, Jonathan, Warren, and... who the fuck is that?
You owe me, man.
Oh, or else what? You'll train another pack of devil dogs to ruin my prom?
That wasn't me. How many times do I have to say it? The prom thing was my lame-o brother Tucker.
Andrew, Tucker's brother. You know, the guy with the demon dogs from season 3? Okay. Warren seems to be the leader of the trio as he gives him Fashnik the Slayer's details so that he can kill her himself. In other news, Giles is back and is delighted at the sight of Buffy. He tells her that he'll help her calculate exactly how much money she needs and not to worry. He's not delighted with Willow, however, which leads into a favourite scene of mine.
And then, next thing you know, Buffy.
You're a very stupid girl.
What?
I love that turn. You're like, oh shit, Giles isn't playing around. And Willow is even taken aback, but soon threatens Giles when he insults her.
You're right. The magics I used are very powerful. I'm very powerful, and maybe it's not such a good idea for you to piss me off.
Oh, I fucking love this scene, it's so good. So many oh shit moments. Everyone heads to bed, however Dawn and Giles have trouble getting to sleep and have a chat in the hallway while the Infashnic demon shows up and knocks out Giles. Ah yes, normality is returning. Spike and Buffy are having a brief chat on the porch about the money issues, but Buffy quickly returns and deals with the Infashnic in the flooded basement.
Oh. Did you know this place was flooded?
Next day the gang get to cleaning up the mess when Buffy suddenly receives a call from Angel who wants to meet with her, leaving Giles to sort out the financial stuff on his own. Wait, I thought Cordelia was told about Buffy's return and Angel ran to speak with her at night. It's day here and the meeting is sorted out. I don't know, maybe they had multiple conversations, but this is ultimately the only crossover of the season and it ends up being a bit of a mess. Like I mentioned in my Angel Season 3 video, this meeting is never shown on screen on either due to the network change. All we know is that it was intense and didn't end well. Both shows completely forget about it following a passing mention in the following episodes, and you should do too. Buffy struggles financially now in what the writers claimed was an attempt at giving Buffy more adult problems to face, but instead decided to drop this in the next episode as they found it too boring. I don't know, I see where they're coming from I suppose, but why doesn't Anya offer to pay Buffy for the help she's given with the magic box over the year? She helped set up all that and move everything in, that's gotta be worth at least a couple hundred or so. Giles returns and he'll stick around for another 4 episodes. He isn't happy with what Willow's done, but is glad that Buffy is back. She isn't 100% though, which he notices when he attempts to reach out to her and she brushes him off. She leaves him with all the financial calculations, her financial calculations, so that she can go meet Angel and, oh, he doesn't like that. It's not as good as his look at Willow when she suggests using a spell to clean up the mess. Oh, look at that stare, I'm shitting myself just looking at it. Willow's threat to Giles, although she retracts it immediately after, is very much foreshadowing to the turn she'll take in the later part of the season. All that magic is going to her head, dark magics, and it's not healthy. The trio are introduced as our big bads for the season. No, I'm not kidding, they are going to give Buffy the most shit for the longest time this season, so in my eyes they're the big bad. They're a light-hearted addition to the darkest season of the show as Warren, Jonathan and Andrew begin their meddling with Buffy and trying to take over Sunnydale. Originally, as a surprise to no one, Tucker was supposed to be the third member of the trio and act as the leader. However, Brad Kane, who played the character, wasn't available long term, so they created Andrew to act as his replacement, with Warren assuming the leader role. I don't know what Brad Kane was doing though. Looking through his IMDb brings me to Thumbelina. Maybe his on-set experiences weren't great, although he did return to provide the singing voice for Jonathan in season 4. Anyway, we'll talk more about these guys as the season progresses, but overall, I don't mind this episode. It's good to have the gang all back together again finally. The trio plan on having a competition to see if they can take the Slayer out, be it temporarily or, for the aim fingers crossed, permanently. Buffy's still trying to come up with a plan of what to do with herself since it's too late or early to reapply for college. She decides to audit and sit in on some of Tara and Willow's classes to get a head start for next year, when Warren takes his turn at Buffy. He places a device on her that causes time to speed up at inconvenient times, causing her to miss classes, as well as trap her under a table from high-speed people. She finds the device luckily and destroys it. Xander manages to get Buffy on his construction crew so that she can earn some money when some demons, summoned by Andrew, attack her. She saves the crew but causes a mess as she does so. Xander fires her, politely so that she can research at the magic box what's doing this stuff to her. Buffy tries working at the magic box, which I'm glad Anya actually offered since it was clearly the easiest option for her to earn money. Jonathan is last up though and puts Buffy in a time loop which will only break when she solves a theoretically impossible task, which is retrieving a deadly mummy hand for an arrogant and impatient customer. While going insane as she can never seem to escape this loop and no one seems to be listening to her about it, she offers to special order one for the lady and that satisfies her break in the loop. Buffy visits Spike that night and they go out to find information about the attacks on Buffy at a demon bar. Not Willie's though, that dude is gone. A group of demons are playing poker for kittens as Spike joins the game to get information while Buffy gets completely plastered in the corner. She leaves after freeing the kittens and begins to complain to Spike about not being able to hold a job. The trio meanwhile are having an argument about who is the best James Bond.
Yes, back when Bond was Connery and movies were decent.
Who even remembers Connery? I mean, Roger Moore was smooth.
I like Timothy Dalton.
Oh, Andrew, you might have just become my favourite character with talk like that. Oh, seriously, Timothy Dalton's Bond is underrated as all fuck. Anyway, Buffy realises she's seen their van all day when the attacks were happening. Jonathan manages to transform himself into a massive demon temporarily to distract the drunk Slayer, running off into the night. Back at the house, Giles offers Buffy a check to cover the expenses of her debt, and Buffy is extremely thankful.
Knowing you're always gonna be here.
Oh yep, Giles wants to go home again, and the audience are let in on that at the end of the episode. And the main chunk of the episode is spent with Buffy being inconvenienced by the trio, ruining her chances of a steady job. The time loop segment is definitely the highlight, and I find the banter that the trio have is making them grow on me the more I see of them. They are complete amateurs, and that's something new that the show hasn't tried before. It does kind of ruin the flow of the villain progression the show had been doing for the past 5 seasons, but I can make a point for that not being the case as we continue on and see more. It feels weird that Jonathan is one of the villains though. I don't think neither he nor Andrew really view themselves as evil rather than just having a competition. Jonathan likes Buffy. They made up at the end of Superstar and now he's plotting against her. This is Warren that's pushing this agenda. He has bigger plans for what he wants to do, and I think Buffy will get in the way of that once she gets a whiff of what he's going to do. And trust me, Warren will do some messed up shit in the coming season, just you wait. I think Jane Espenson is handling the trio for this part of the season. She's been a writer for the past 3 episodes, co-writing these last 2, which include the trio, while Fury and Petrie write for the gang. I'm only theorising here since Espenson tends to write the more comedic episodes, so don't sue me for slander if I'm way off with that assumption. Clem makes his first appearance though. You've gotta love Clem. Even though he eats kittens and isn't nice to look at, he's a legend, let me tell you. He'll be back in a little while, but it's nice to see him make a brief teaser appearance here. There are elements of this episode I like, while there are others that are a bit forgetful. Like, I completely forgot that Buffy tried out for Xander's construction crew because it takes up all of about 10 minutes of the episode. Stephen S. DeKnight is back after joining the writing team in the second half of the previous season. I mentioned he likes to do some questionable things, which results in him leaving the writing team after this season, focusing more on Angel, since it's a darker show tonally and his messed up subject matters fit better on that show. In theory. But this is a different kind of messed up. He has written for us the first instance of a Dawn and her annoying high school friends episode. Now these are some of my least favourite of the show, and although this isn't the worst of these types of episodes, no, we'll get to that fucking jacket episode in the next season. This isn't great either. It's Halloween and the magic box is as busy as can be on the scariest night of the year. Xander announces his and Anya's engagement after the store closes and they throw an extempore celebration party. Willow decorates with her magic, which prompts Tara to express her concern for how casual Willow is being with her magic and how dangerous it could be to depend on it too much.
What's your problem? Willow, I just wish that you would stop and think about what you're... Sorry.
Oh, why have you got to walk in right as we're getting development? Dawn leaves to stay over at her friend Janice's. What damn, is that Joan of Arcadia? She's actually sneaking out with her to spend the night fucking about doing stupid teenager stuff. She meets Zach, Janice's boyfriend, and Justin, who takes a liking to Dawn, and the two flirt throughout the night. They pay a visit to old man Kaltenbach's house, and whenever a writer calls a character old man something or other, they're really stretching for tropes to cling to so the viewer feels more at ease.
Look, you don't have to do this.
What drugs was this actor on? He ends up inviting them in and he's creepy as all fuck, making you think he's evil, but like a classic green malt twist. Justin and Zach are actually vampires and Justin kills the old man without telling the girls. The gang soon realise that Dawn has duped them when Janice's mum calls wondering where her daughter is. They all head out to look for her, where Tara and Willow have that argument I was waiting for at the Bronze, and Tara storms out when Willow refuses to listen to her.
What do you want me to do? Just sit back and keep my mouth shut?
Well, that'd be a good start.
Zach steals a car and they drive it to the middle of the woods, and Justin and Dawn begin making out. Justin vamps out and Dawn is at first taken aback, but soon begins to warm up to Justin when he offers to side her so that they can spend eternity together. Yeah, Dawn actually gives in to Justin, which is insane, but Buffy, Spike and Giles find them before anything can happen. Giles saves Janice from Zach staking him with a tree and Janice disappears, never to be seen again in the show, although we will hear about her. They take out the rest of the vampires. Apparently there's a group of them now, and Buffy leaves Giles to tell Dawn off, which he isn't happy about since Dawn is Buffy's responsibility now. Upstairs, Tara and Willow continue to squabble as they get into bed. Willow then uses a bramble to cast a spell on Tara so that she forgets their fight, and they go to bed all happy. That is messed up. Trust has gone flying out the window with this one. Tara is right and shares Giles' worries that Willow is going overboard with all the magic. The thing is, Willow was used to being a nerdy high schooler who got bullied until she became a witch, giving her the power she's never had. It goes to her head. She's in control and doesn't have to take shit from anyone. Not trying to justify what she does here, but it's still fucked. Undoubtedly fucked. Xander clearly begins to have doubts about marrying Anya when Giles shares a brief chat with him about becoming a man and all that. I don't think Xander likes the idea of his life being over once he's married, doing the same stuff day in and day out, raising kids and working construction. He craves that fight against evil and is scared that marriage is a step that's too earlier in his timeline for now. Obviously the majority of the episode is spent with Dawn and a lot of it is completely aimless. They go here, do this, then go here, and the vampires all die. Dawn giving it to Justin initially is huge. I don't understand why this never comes up again. She does eventually stake him when he tries again, so I guess she snapped out of it, but god, she was really willing to become a vampire if the gang didn't show up when they did. I like the subversion they do with the old man. They show him early on in the episode like he's planning to kill some kids and that he's deranged. In the end he's probably just got Alzheimer's or something. Plus he mentions he was a toy maker when some sort of incident got him fired. Oh, I want to know more about that. What did he do? Kill some kids for real? Well, we'll never know because he's killed off to keep the aimless antics moving. It's not a bad episode per se, although I don't really like it. Trust the night to start two of the most hated storylines of the show in one episode, being Xander's cold feet and Willow's spell on Tara. Say, does anyone feel a song coming on? I was a bit unsure how I was going to tackle this episode. Should I summarise the plot and then go over the songs individually, or risk a DMCA takedown by playing clips of the songs? So I plan to talk about the songs as we go through the plot since they're integral to it, and I'll play brief 10-second or so long clips of the choruses to introduce them in the summary. This is the last of the big three, which are the 3 episodes that yada yada yada, you know all this. It's Whedon's only contribution to the season, and he not only writes the episode, but all the songs and music. The episode begins with Tara finding the bramble that Willow used on our last episode, although she doesn't know what it is and thinks it's just cool or something. The first song is Going Through the Motions, where Buffy sings about not feeling the same since she's come back from heaven and how she just wants to be alive.
But I've been going through the motions, walking through the part. Nothing seems to penetrate my heart.
The next day the gang meet up at the magic box and begin theorising about why they're singing and what's causing it. Of course, all in song with I've Got a Theory.
I've got a theory, it doesn't matter. What can't we face if we're together?
Despite her negative outlook, Buffy is the optimist here and tells the gang that they'll get through it no matter what. While Dawn steals from the magic box again, Willow and Tara head out to spend some time together, which cues Under Your Spell.
I'm under your spell, nothing I can do. You just took my soul with you.
Tara sings of her undying love for Willow, under her spell of both love and, unbeknownst to her, the forgetting spell. That night a tap-dancing man combusts into flames and fries in front of a demon.
That's entertainment.
The next morning, Xander and Anya wake up to sing of their fears of getting married and spending the rest of their lives with each other, despite their imperfections, with I'll Never Tell.
Like she thinks I'm ordinary.
Like it's all just temporary.
Like her toes are kind of hairy, but it's all very well, 'cause God knows I'll never tell.
This would be sweet if they actually had a proper resolution, instead dancing to distract themselves from the truth. They rush to Giles to try and come up with an explanation. Buffy pays one of her usual visits to Spike, who's just as clueless about what's going on, although he is yet to sing. Cue Spike's song, Rest in Peace, where he sings about the temptation Buffy brings when she visits, and that she would never be with him despite the fact he claims to love her.
Let me rest in peace, let me get some sleep, let me take my love and bury it in a hole 6 foot deep.
This is something we've never heard from Spike before. He always seemed happy to see Buffy, but as it turns out it pains him since she'll never love him back, and it's like she's rubbing it in every time she shows up. Back at the house, Dawn talks to Tara about the argument she had with Willow, which of course Tara doesn't remember, and she rushes off to investigate the Bramble's involvement. Dawn is kidnapped by some creepy mask guys right as she's about to break into song about not being noticed or cared about, and here we meet Sweet, the villain behind this whole musical fiasco.
You call me and I come a-running, I turn the music on, I bring the fun in.
He sings about taking Dawn back with him to the underworld to be his queen since she supposedly summoned him. He also tells her that if the songs keep going, people will start combusting due to the unnatural energy in them. Dawn tells him that her sister is a Slayer, and Sweet sends his minions out to find her. In the magic box, Buffy trains with Giles, cueing his song Standing, where he realises he's preventing Buffy from growing, looking after Dawn, and since she's always depended on him, and always will.
But now I understand, I am standing in the way.
He has to leave in order for her to become more independent. Also, he kind of wants to go home. Tara arrives at the magic box and discovers that Willow has indeed done a forgetting spell on her, which brings in a reprise of both Under Your Spell and Standing, where Tara and Giles sing a duet about having to come to terms with leaving the ones they love.
Wish I could stay. Wish I could stay.
Tara doesn't trust Willow anymore after this, and she knows that this isn't the only time she's crossed the line with her magic since she raised Buffy and all. Spike shows up with one of Sweet's minions, and he tells them that Sweet has indeed kidnapped Dawn and is camped out at the Bronze. Giles sends Buffy to take on Sweet alone as a sort of test to be more independent, like he was saying about earlier. The rest of the gang want to help, but Giles puts his foot down and Buffy leaves, depressed that none of her friends are there for her when she needs them most. Cue Walk Through the Fire, the first ensemble song, where the gang all realise they should stand with Buffy to help her. While Buffy comes to terms with her friends turning away, planning to go out in a blaze of glory, a death wish on her mind, similar to what Spike expressed last season in Fool for Love.
So we will walk through the fire and let it burn.
Buffy arrives at the Bronze and offers Sweet to take her instead of Dawn to whatever hellish world may await her. She sings Something to Sing About, where she reveals that she feels like she has no reason to live or exist.
Give me something to sing about.
The gang arrives during her song and she reveals, against her own volition, that she was in heaven, and that the gang ripped her out of paradise to bring her back to Earth. She then begins dancing rapidly in an attempt to kill herself like she mentioned in Walk Through the Fire, and Spike is the one to stop her, convincing her to go on living while the rest of the gang just stand by and watch on. Although Dawn does quote Buffy's speech at her again.
The hardest thing in this world is to live in it.
Sweet is entertained and prepares to leave with Dawn, who still swears down that she never summoned him, which is when Xander puts his hand up, admitting that it was him all along. He summoned Sweet to cheer everyone up with a few songs and didn't know what was actually going to happen. Sweet decides not to take Xander with him as his queen, and then he leaves, satisfied with the chaos he's created with his music. Our final song is Where Do We Go From Here, where the gang sum up the mess that the songs have caused between them all.
Understand we'll go hand in hand, but we'll walk alone in fear. Tell me, where do we go?
Spike storms out during the song, followed by Buffy, and as they sing to each other, they share a passionate kiss, ending the episode. Now, what can I say about this episode that hasn't already been said? It started the musical episode trope that many shows would attempt after this, with varying degrees of success. This episode manages to keep the feeling of the show intact and feels like Buffy throughout. The songs are all brilliant, everyone has their favourite, I'm partial to both Rest in Peace and Standing, but there's an uneasy feeling to the beautiful Under Your Spell that's brilliant too. The main story elements are told through song, like Tara discovering that Willow did a spell on her, which she'll confront her about next episode, as well as Buffy telling the gang she was in heaven, which she never wanted to do since she knew they would feel guilty about it, and sure enough, this will cause havoc within the other members of the gang, namely Willow. Buffy tries to end her pain during the climax, but Spike is the one to save her, resulting in her kissing him at the end of the episode. It's a great ending to the episode, but it does open a whole can of worms for the rest of the season. There's a few cameos to mention throughout the episode. David Fury plays the famous Mustard Man, and that's Marty Noxon playing the parking ticket girl, each singing a line of melody. Let's talk about fan theories now, as a few of them are notable within the community. Firstly, a lot of people headcanon that Xander's admission of summoning the demon at the end of the episode is him covering for Dawn so that she isn't taken to be Sweet's queen. As cool as an idea as this is, Joss Whedon himself has gone on to say that this was always his intention to have everyone assume Dawn summoned Sweet accidentally, only for a classic Buffy subversion that it was Xander the whole time, being naive with magic as he's always been. It was never a conscious decision, it's because he's the last person you'd expect to summon a demon following his bad experience with magic and Bewitched, Bothered and Bewildered. Secondly, I once saw a few people debating that Sweet may in fact be the devil. The show never shows Satan, or at least in the biblical sense of the figure. Sweet talks about being from a kingdom below at one point, which could be referring to the Earth's version of hell rather than a separate dimension. I like the idea of this, that the devil we've all heard of is actually a singing demon that causes havoc with his songs and dances. This isn't true at all, but I like the thought. To sum up, it's the best musical episode of any show, bar none. Now, excuse me while I play that fucking soundtrack for a millionth time. Let me rest in peace, let me get some sleep, let me take my love and The gangmen as Buffy have a panicked discussion about how messed up it was that they brought Buffy back from heaven, and soon Tara and Willow begin having an all-out argument. Tara attempts to break up with Willow after revealing she knows about the forgetting spell, but Willow pleads that she won't do any more spells for a week to prove that she can live without magic to Tara, and that she'll never do anything like that again. While patrolling, Spike interrogates Buffy about the kiss they shared at the end of the last episode, which Buffy shrugs off until a literal loan shark named Teeth catches up with Spike and tells him to pay his debt of kittens, or else he'll be whacked by Teeth's goons. Giles tells Buffy the next day that he's heading back to England in order for her to grow as an adult without relying on him all the time to deal with the adult issues. Buffy is kinda like, I just told you I got ripped out of heaven, cut me some slack for a little bit, but Giles is having none of it. He plans to tell the entire gang, so he tells them to all gather at the magic box, and Willow, Tara and Dawn are planning to head there together, but Willow pretends to be running late so that she can perform yet another spell to make both Tara and Buffy forget the pain of Willow's spells, in a terrible attempt to clean up her mess. It's also connected to this crystal that turns black when the spell is complete. They head to the magic box, as well as Spike, who's in disguise from Teeth's mooks, when the crystal turns black. Suddenly a spark jumps out the fire and sets the whole bag of brambles on fire, causing the entire gang to pass out and wake up not remembering who they are or where they are. The rest of the episode is spent with the group figuring out who they all are, some getting it spot on like Buffy and Dawn realising they're sisters, but some are way off like Anya and Giles thinking they're engaged and that Spike is Giles' son, who mistakes his name for Randy, which is the name in the jacket of the person he clearly stole the suit from.
Randy Giles? Why not just call me Horny Giles or Desperate for a Shag Giles? I knew there was a reason I hated you.
Randy's family name, undoubtedly.
Buffy discovers she has superpowers when Teeth's vampires show up looking for Spike, and when they take them on, allowing the rest of the gang to escape through the sewers, Spike realises he's a vampire, which scares off Buffy. In the sewers, the gang are chased by a vampire who they manage to stake. As Giles and Anya attempt to fix their memories by summoning random spells from books, Xander stands on the crystal which had fallen out of Willow's pocket, and their memories are all restored. Everyone is betrayed by Willow's spell, and Tara ultimately leaves her for doing exactly what she told her not to do. Giles leaves for England on a sour note, and we won't see him again for a little while. Spike approaches a sulky Buffy at the the bronze, and the two begin another makeout session. I do like this episode. There's elements that are quite interesting in watching the characters try to figure out who they are. For example, Willow and Tara are quick to fall for each other again, while Xander and Anya barely speak a word to each other, almost like one is destined to happen and the other isn't. Spike starts describing himself when he realises he's a good vampire, and it's eerily similar to Angel, which Buffy isn't amused by. I always thought it was funny that Spike supposedly hates Angel's guts, but wants to be like him deep down. Giles and Anya's segments of the climax are my favourite moments of the episode, as everything just keeps getting worse the more they try, and then Giles finds the plane ticket for London in his pocket and assumes he's leaving Anya. Giles leaves though at the end of the episode, quite bitterly I might add. I mentioned last season that Anthony Head was interested in spending more time with his family back in England, and this season officially marks the end of his term as main cast, becoming what we know as a recurring character under the special guest mantle. It still doesn't make sense to me though that after finding out Buffy, and this is later confirmed by a season 4 episode of Angel, is the only being to ever come back from heaven, and that he doesn't stay with her for at least a little while to make sure she's alright. Because the thing is, Buffy clearly isn't alright. She's kissing Spike again. He's the one that's played that Giles role for her, saving her from going over the edge and being there to listen to her. Plus they have the connection with death. Giles comes off as incredibly out of character here. His thought process of getting Buffy adjusted to adult life is fair, I get that, but his intentions to leave should have been extended after finding out Buffy's truth. She needs him. She sang about it, but he wants to go back to England and presumably be a playboy with Olivia again. I'm not surprised that Tara leaves Willow for this, probably for her own good. I like the song at the end, Goodbye to You by Michelle Branch. It fits the theme of the ending and certain characters leaving other characters. The episode is good, minus Giles being an asshole, but he's gone now. The gang have to move on without him. And just like Triangle, it really doesn't go well. Willow finally remembers that Amy the Rat used to be Amy the Human and realises she has the capabilities to turn her back, which she does. Amy doesn't know how long she's been a rat, mistaking it for only a couple of weeks. Buffy returns to the house from patrolling where she has a brief interaction with Spike, who wants to talk about their kissing again, but she blows him off. She almost tells Willow about her makeout sessions with Spike, but Amy's appearance throws her off.
How have you been? Rat. You? Dead. Oh.
Meanwhile, the trio are back to their shenanigans, stealing a diamond from the Sunnydale History Museum, freezing a security guard with their brand new prototype freeze ray. Buffy sees this on the news and rushes to investigate where Spike also is, and she confesses to Spike that the only reason she kissed him again was because she was depressed about Giles' departure and needed someone to lean on. Spike isn't having it and Buffy hits him. Instinctively he hits her back, but his chip doesn't go off. He fakes it after having a small party in his head that he's free and leaves to try and bite someone, believing himself to finally be free from the shackles of the chip. But of course, the chip goes off when he tries to bite a girl and he heads to Warren, convincing him to look at his chip or else he'll break a Star Wars figurine.
Hey, alright, let's not do anything crazy here.
That's a limited edition 1979 mint condition Boba Fett.
Warren tells him that the chip is working fine, and Spike comes to the conclusion that Buffy is the problem and that she isn't considered human or alive enough for his chip to go off. The gang are researching at the magic box for what the purpose of the diamond is and why it was stolen. They're not happy when Willow uses her magic again to hack into the museum's database to find that it has mystical properties, whatever that means. Later, Amy convinces Willow to come out to the bronze and have some fun, where they perform a ridiculous amount of spells to fuck with everyone. Buffy gets a sinister call from Spike asking to meet, but she doesn't show, and when she leaves the magic box he corners her and reveals that he can hit her without his chip going off.
How?
Don't you get it? Don't you see? You came back wrong.
They begin a fight which leads into an abandoned house, and the fight soon turns into a kiss, which turns into full-blown sex, and the house collapses around them as they sleep together. Tara and Dawn, who have spent the day together, arrive back at the house, but since nobody's in, Tara agrees to stay with Dawn until someone comes back so that she isn't alone. Thing is, they wake up in the morning and still neither Willow nor Buffy are back. Buffy wakes up with Spike and instantly regrets what she's done, adamant that she'll never do it again, which Spike isn't convinced of, and that none of the gang can ever find out about this. Well, since the last secret got spilled somehow, I'm gonna guess this one will end similarly. Willow and Amy arrive at the house, and Willow is shocked to see Tara. Amy begins to brag about how much magic they did at the bronze the previous night, and Tara storms out as Buffy arrives. Willow heads to bed, and that night goes out with Amy again, much to the gang's worries. Amy takes Willow to see Rack, an incredibly creepy and intimidating warlock with magic so incredibly dark, addicts flood his abode to just get a dose. Willow gets a taste of this magic and has a massive drug-like trip, waking up in her bedroom the next morning with almost no memory of the night. She initially isn't happy after visiting Rack, even making an invisible Tara to cuddle after a cry in the shower. That evening, Willow and Dawn make plans to go see a movie, but while they're out, Willow makes a detour to Rack's place, getting another dose while Dawn waits in the waiting room for hours on end. Buffy comes home from the magic box to find Amy stealing some magic supplies, and Buffy interrogates her to find out where she took Dawn, and Amy tells her about Rack's. The thing about Rack's place is that it moves, and Amy doesn't know where it's going to be tonight. Buffy turns to Spike, and he tells her that only people capable of sensing magic can find it, like witches, warlocks, or even vampires. They head out to find it. Willow has another vision of a demon and leaves Rack's place, while Dawn is understandably upset that they've not only missed the film, but that Willow's left her in a room with a bunch of addicts all evening. They take a walk until that same demon Willow saw during her magic trip actually appears and claims that Willow summoned her with the dark magic she's high on. Willow uses her magic to steal a car, crashing it head on into a stone pole, injuring both of them. Did they even put their seatbelts on? They should be dead. Dawn gets out and is attacked by the demon, screaming, which Buffy and Spike hear, taking the demon on. It eventually burns up and disappears when Willow sobers up from the magic, waking up in the car. Willow apologizes to Dawn in tears until...
Oh, wow! Wow!
Willow pleads with Buffy to help her, wanting to be clean from magic. Buffy, despite the fact that Willow has never been there for her the entire time she's been back, takes Willow back to the house and the two share a touching conversation about all that stuff I mentioned earlier about Willow being just a girl until she found magic which brought her power. It went to her head, and it drove Tara away, who she wants to get back. So she plans to give magic up for good. The episode ends with Willow having some cold turkey that night while Buffy holds a cross in her garlic-covered room to keep Spike away. So a double episode to bring us to the mid-season break, focused on Willow's continuing abuse of magic, as well as Buffy sleeping with Spike and following regret. Firstly, Alison Hannigan is a great actress, and has a very convincing performance here, but there's far more to this arc than meets the eye. Sarah Michelle Gellar has gone on record saying that she was told to compete with Hannigan for more scenes, as the writers pitted those two specifically against each other. According to stories from both Amber Benson and James Marsters, Hannigan began to get a bit egotistical, without naming her, similar to her character after finding international success with the first two American Pie movies. She fought not only for more scenes, but demanded that they change the billing in the opening credits following Anthony Head's exit so that it credits her as the senior actor of the bunch, the one to watch, so to speak. I don't usually talk about behind the scenes drama at length, but this winds me around to my point that this entire arc is completely unnecessary for her character, not to mention out of character on top of that. Okay, she visits Rack, realises her fuck up, and cries about it, but then, after one dose, is already addicted and takes Dawn with her while she gets high? This is the show tackling substance abuse, by the way, but I can't help but think this is a rush job from how it escalates so radically in just 2 episodes. Willow loses Tara. I would think that is sufficient enough reason to not do magic again. She doesn't and goes out with Amy, where Tara finds out and storms off. I would think that this is sufficient enough reason to not do magic again, but Willow goes out with Amy again and visits Rack. She realises her fuck up the next morning and hugs an invisible Tara, missing her. I would think that this is sufficient enough reason not to do magic again, but then the car and the breakdown. This rapid escalation is so rushed. Rack should have been introduced earlier than this, with Amy pressuring her into doing more while Willow was still with Tara, causing Tara to feel concerned for Willow's safety, and after the car crash, she leaves her, getting us to the point where Willow realises she's lost everything. That would make much more sense, but instead Willow continues to do out-of-character things, with the only explanation being... Cocaine's a hell of a drug. Secondly, Buffy and Spike sleep together, which Buffy decides to keep hidden from the gang, although she comes very close to telling Willow about the kisses, which might have prevented this from happening. She finds out that there may be something wrong with her after Spike reveals he can hit her again, and Buffy will grow concerned about this over the following episodes. She sleeps with Spike mainly for the same reasons as she kissed him: Giles' departure, not having anyone to connect with and comfort. This is a far more interesting storyline to me than Willow's addiction, but nevertheless Willow gets more of the spotlight here. Also, I want to point out this annoying paradoxical flaw with Dawn's character that I noted during Wrecked. Listen to this line.
Okay, now I'm just a kid, and even I know that came out wrong.
Hey, kid.
I'm not a kid.
I know what you're thinking, nitpick, but the show's gonna have her change her mind again about whether she's a kid or not in just a few episodes' time, and it's a contributing factor in her turn to most annoying character in the show. The way she treats Willow afterwards is understandable to me. I get the slap. I get it. Willow deserves it. The trio appear in Smash, with the robbery being the centre of the gang's attention for the bulk of the story, but don't appear at all in Wrecked due to the gang's personal issues taking over. Xander and Anya are the only two who don't seem to be distracted by anything. What the hell are they doing for the entire duration of Wrecked? So things go from bad to worse for the gang. How are they going to fix it? Willow and Buffy begin throwing out all of Willow's magical supplies, while Dawn refuses to speak to both of them for various reasons. Willow is an obvious one, but she blames Buffy for letting it happen. Fuck off, Dawn. You could have left Rax and went home at any point. A social worker named Doris pays a visit to the house to evaluate how fit Buffy is to be her legal guardian, finding what looks like weed and Spike lying around looking kinda trashy, who's looking for his lighter. Doris decides she's seen enough and wants to take Dawn away from Buffy, her declining grades being another factor in all this mess. Spike attempts to comfort Buffy, calling her Goldilocks, which she hates, and cuts her hair shorter despite him getting it fixed at a local hairdresser's. The trio use the diamond to build their invisibility ray, which they plan to use on themselves so they can look at naked women, but Buffy's sudden appearance causes them to panic and turn her invisible, as well as a few other objects in the street. As Anya and Xander began planning their wedding, Buffy comes in and begins playing around while explaining to the two what happened.
We get the how, then we got how to make her unseen sight seen again, right?
It's alright.
Buffy, could you focus, please?
The rest of the episode is mostly spent with Buffy messing about with people while invisible, visiting the social services place to mess with Doris enough to make her boss think she's going insane, so she's taken off the case. She goes to Spike's and sleeps with him again while invisible. Xander thinks Willow might have something to do with it, which she's insulted by, but they make up when they head to the scene of the crime, and Willow concludes that the drivers of the mysterious black van Buffy kept seeing are behind it. She has Xander take an invisible pylon, which she spray paints to the magic box, which soon begins to fall apart, and Xander worries that the same thing will happen to Buffy. Xander goes to Spike's to ask if he knows where Buffy is while they are mid-sex, but Xander remains oblivious, despite also catching them earlier in the episode. Spike begins to grow tired of being with Buffy, but not really being with Buffy, and Buffy claims that the only reason she came to see him was because she technically isn't there since she's invisible. That's a stupid reason. Buffy goes home to Dawn, who jarringly takes her invisibility too seriously.
Do you even care about who did this to you, or if you're gonna be stuck this way? You're making jokes and flying pizzas.
I don't think that's
I can't talk to you like this.
Even I think that's ridiculously out of character for Dawn, but so begins the decreasing appeal of her character. She's worried about Buffy, I know, but she doesn't even know what did this to her, or that she'll melt, or anything. She's still pissed at her about what happened with Willow, and it's like, just get over yourself for a second. Willow finds the location of the black van through the DMV and gets kidnapped by the invisible trio, who threaten Buffy over voicemail to come and save her at the arcade. She does, and Buffy manages to use her Slayer hearing to take the trio out, with Willow turning them all visible again. Buffy finally meets the trio, or at least as villains.
So you three have what? Banded together to be pains in my ass?
We're your arch nemesis. Sees.
They leave a pretty poor impression on Buffy and Willow, fleeing to leave the two to share a conversation on the curb outside, where Buffy admits she's come to the conclusion that she doesn't want to die, and Willow admits that she managed to find out where the trio were without using magic of any kind. I like this ending. Both of these characters are making progress in certain areas. Buffy's reasoning for going to Spike while invisible is a bit ridiculous for my liking, but I guess in a way she's addicted like Willow is. She craves someone to lean on. And Spike is always going to be there for her since he loves her and all. She can depend on them, but now begins to depend on her friends again following her chat with Willow. Speaking of Willow, she's officially giving up magic, or at least until she can learn to live without it again so she doesn't depend on it so much. She manages to find the trio with just her wits and intelligence fighting off the temptation to use magic to make the job easier. Obviously most of the excitement and attraction to the episode is the invisibility plot, which is fun for the most part, besides Dawn killing the mood in the latter half of the episode. Buffy sleeps with Spike again, for reasons not particularly strong enough for me to attempt to justify it, so just chalk it up to temptation, which seems to be a recurring theme this season. Xander catches him twice and doesn't catch on, albeit Buffy is invisible the second time, but from how Spike's ear moves and the noises, it's not hard to put two and two together. Was Spike really doing naked push-ups in bed? This episode is also used to write out the threat of social services who planned to take Dawn away before Buffy begins ruining poor Doris's life. She acted in the interest of Dawn. She wasn't aware of anything besides Dawn's grades failing. Buffy also meets the trio for the first time this season, and many more schemes are to come. That being said, let's do an episode where the trio don't feature at all. A lot of people cite this episode as the worst of the entire show, and while it's a weak episode, there are far worse than this. Almost the entire episode surrounds Buffy's new job at the Doublemeat Palace, a fast food joint that's based around a secret ingredient. Buffy, between sex breaks, ends up uncovering a conspiracy about the secret ingredient perhaps being people when she finds a finger in the meat grinding machine. Her creepy manager Manny shrugs her off, but when she announces it to the whole restaurant, he has no choice but to fire her. In other news, Anya invites an old vengeance demon friend of hers named Halfrick to Xander's place to invite her to the wedding. The two share a conversation where Halfrick expresses her doubts about Xander being right for Anya. However, Anya shrugs these off, standing by her man. Willow gets dosed with magic by Amy, sabotaging her sobriety, and Willow works up the courage to confess to Buffy that even though Amy did that to her, she never used the power to do spells of any kind. She uses her old chemistry skills to determine that the secret ingredient isn't human, it's vegetables. She rushes to tell Buffy, who breaks into the Doublemeat Palace to find more clues, where one of the regular customers seen throughout the episode, a sweet old lady, is revealed to have killed Manny and wears a wig covering a massive worm creature that eats the remains. It paralyzes Buffy using some liquid it spurts, and Willow arrives to save the day, never using a single spell, instead the infamous meat grinder. Willow shuts Amy out of her life after telling Buffy what happened between them, and Buffy uses her new knowledge of the secret ingredient to get her old job back, now under new and very sane management. So the purpose of the episode is to supply Buffy with a job that solves her income issue brought up over the season. It is a ridiculous episode with a ridiculous twist about the old lady, but I've seen much worse from this show. Be or Bad is worse than this. Hell, most of season 4 is worse than this. On top of that, we see that Buffy's relationship with Spike is continuing behind closed doors as they share a rather dirty experience out the back of the restaurant. Halfrick makes her first appearance and there's far more to her character than the show lets on. You might think she's a one-off, brought in to show how committed Anya is to Xander. Nope, we will see her a few more times after this, and I'll go more in depth in a future episode about what's significant about her appearance. Willow shuts Amy out after she does a pretty ratty thing for a human being. Guess the effects are still wearing off. We won't see her again for another season. Her character having gone from competent witch into, her mother? Yeah, abusing magic, doing shady things to ruin people's lives. She's become like her mother. I like that little attention to detail, although it's a shame that a person who was once an ally to the gang has become a sort of headache instead of a villain. I know she has a brief run as a villain in the comics, but the other elements to that storyline are so incredibly stupid that I almost don't want to see it as canon. I don't hate this episode, it's fine. Kinda reminds me of the earlier seasons, to be honest. The trio are back and have completed a device that makes any woman their willing sex slave. That's a fucking massive step in insanity, but they've been talking about it since their first appearance. Definitely another Warren push. In fact, he uses it on Katrina, his ex-girlfriend, who wakes up before they can take advantage of her and she attempts to flee in horror. Warren, scared that he'll go to prison for attempted rape, smashes a glass bottle over her head which kills Katrina. What the hell? Meanwhile, Buffy has a conversation with Tara confessing that she doesn't think that the spell brought her back right, but doesn't want to bother Willow with anything magic-related right now. Tara promises to check if anything went wrong with the spell, running into Willow for the first time in a while, and the conversation goes pretty well, all things considered. Buffy goes to the bronze with the gang that night and Spike meets her on a balcony as the two begin dogging while Spike instructs her to watch her friends as he does so. Again, I say, what the hell? Buffy patrols the following night and considers visiting Spike again, but bottles it at the last second. Buffy soon finds herself in some sort of time-meddling spell that confuses her while she fights a group of demons chasing a girl. Spike shows up and attempts to help, but Buffy ends up accidentally hitting him in her confusion. She also smacks the girl, who takes a tumble down a hill. Once Buffy snaps out of it, she discovers that the girl is dead, and the girl is Katrina, although she doesn't recognise her. Buffy naturally assumes that she killed her, and Spike informs her that he'll handle the cleanup. Of course, it's the trio who have used magic to pass the guilt of Katrina's death to Buffy. Buffy is plagued by said guilt during her dreams and wishes to turn herself into the police, saying goodbye to Dawn before she does so. Dawn takes this personally and accuses Buffy of not wanting to be around her, looking for an excuse to leave again.
You don't want to be here with me. You didn't want to come back. I know that.
Fuck off. Spike fails to convince Buffy to not turn herself in when she hears that her body has been found. She also finds out in the station that the girl was named Katrina, and Buffy remembers that Warren's ex had the same name. He's also considering himself a bit of a villain recently, so she puts two and two together, leaving the station. The gang research the demons, although Buffy knows that Warren and the trio are somehow involved. Warren, meanwhile, is delighted when Katrina's death is ruled a suicide by the police, having literally gotten away with murder. Sorry, how are they going to explain the glass fragments in her head? Autopsies, people? DNA? These are things. Jonathan and Andrew aren't as happy about the whole situation, still harbouring some guilt for letting the situation get so out of hand that murder and rape came into play. Tara gets back to Buffy about the spell and reveals that nothing went wrong. Buffy came back exactly how she left. The reason Spike could hit her was just a misunderstanding with his chip. It wasn't Buffy herself. Since she was technically dead, and I guess that thought cemented in Spike's head, the chip still thought she was. Buffy proceeds to break down at the realisation that it wasn't anything wrong with bringing her back that caused her to have sex with Spike. She did it out of her own volition. She confesses this to Tara, who tries to tell Buffy that Spike has done a lot of good over the past few months and that he loves her. However, Buffy demands not to be forgiven for using Spike, crying in Tara's lap, ending the episode. What a really peculiar and divisive episode. Seriously, not just with the fans, even the cast and crew don't know how to feel about this one. Sarah Michelle Gellar hated it, citing it as her least favourite episode they ever did, mostly due to the balcony scene. Comparatively, Stephen S. Knight, who wrote the fucking episode, says it's one of his favourites. He claims that the infamous balcony scene was actually Whedon's idea, although Whedon has combated this claim by blaming new showrunner Marty Noxon in later interviews for the dark and overtly sexual tone the show took in this season. Knight proves once again that he's into some pretty weird shit by writing an episode surrounding allegations of rape when the trio take a step too far in their quest for taking over Sunnydale. And it won't be the last time Knight writes about rape this season, believe it or fucking not. Let's talk about the balcony scene, because it's the thing most people remember from this episode. I don't like it. Buffy has taken advantage of Spike. Spike is evil. We've processed that in our brains throughout the season. However, forcing her to watch her friends while, and I'm reading the wiki here, having sex is a bit much, don't you think? He believes he holds all the power, reminding Buffy what she's hiding from the people she's looking at right as she's doing it. Hey guys, remember the funny puppet episode? Remember the funny puppet episode? I bet you're thinking that seems like two different shows right about now. She confesses to Tara that Spike is the only person that makes her feel anything anymore, and Tara initially was supposed to relate to Buffy's secret in a very different way.
Sweetie, I'm a fag. I've been there.
Whoa, that line was cut, and I'm very glad. Thanks again, Stephen S. Tonight. Andrew comes to terms with Warren's murder over the course of the episode, at first being mortified, but soon becoming slightly more calm about the idea of getting away with evil. It's Warren's influence that persuades Andrew to be more evil throughout the season, whereas Jonathan, who we know knows better, does know better, and feels guilt even after duping Buffy into thinking she did it. Dawn, again, doesn't seem to grasp the fact that Buffy died and went to heaven, and it may take a little more than a couple of months to readjust back into normal life. She takes it personally, personally. And Dawn loves to take things that have nothing to do with her personally. Oh god, the only thing that can make this worse is another Dawn episode. What's next? Oh, for fuck's sake. Oh sure, a bulk of this episode has nothing to do with Dawn, but the circumstances surrounding the episode's situation are a direct result of her actions. I guess the budget was running out again, because we have another episode where most of it takes place in one location, similar to both Tabula Rasa and Doublemeat Palace. It's Buffy's birthday, and the gang prepares to hold a party at the house to celebrate. Buffy encounters a strange demon on a patrol one night, which disappears into its own sword unbeknownst to Buffy, who takes it back home with her. Dawn continues her klepto arc and steals her present for Buffy, having a meeting with the new school counsellor about any problems she might be having. Dawn wishes that people would stop leaving her, which she believes is the case with both Buffy and the rest of the gang because they wouldn't come with her to the mall. I mean, seriously. Like, they ain't got shit to do. This counsellor is actually Halfrick and performs a spell during the party which prevents anyone in Buffy's house from leaving. Not just the gang are there, but also Sophie, who works with Buffy at the Doublemeat Palace, Richard, who works with Xander, and Anya wants to set Buffy and Richard up so they can go on double dates together. Oh, and Clem. It's not until the following morning that they all realise they can't leave the house, physically unable to move towards the door. Tara is the only one to combat this with magic, but since Willow no longer has any supplies, Tara can't do much. Willow reveals that she actually did keep a few things in case of emergency and allows Tara to use them, although Tara isn't impressed. Tara's spell goes wrong and releases the demon from that sword we saw earlier, and it lunges at Richard, cutting his chest before hiding in the walls. Anya isn't happy that they aren't considering using Willow to get out since she's a powerful witch, but Willow still refuses and Tara stands up for her. Anya storms upstairs to find something to help them, while Buffy and Dawn talk about the new counsellor that Buffy is a bit taken aback by. Anya, for some reason, searches through Dawn's room for a solution and discovers all of the things that Dawn stole from the magic box, much to Anya's outrage. Once Anya learns about the school counsellor, she puts two and two together and calls down Halfrick to undo the spell, although she's stabbed by the demon. Buffy manages to retrap the demon in the sword, destroying the sword to kill it. Halfrick isn't dead though, since vengeance demons are immortal and all, and refuses to lift the curse. However, since she's now in the house, her curse prevents her from leaving, and she's forced to lift it so she can leave, freeing them all. Willow and Tara share a conversation about Tara being proud of Willow, but that now she has to prove herself without the safety net she provided herself. Richard, meanwhile,
we're gonna get him to the ER.
And that's it. I have mixed feelings about this one, like a lot of episodes this season. Firstly, Dawn has finally reached that insufferability stage I've been mentioning. Where to begin? Dawn complains that she has no one to listen to her or speak to, what with the gang being preoccupied with the trio and their own personal issues, namely a wedding, death, and magic addiction. But where's Janice? Pretty sure she and Dawn are still friends. Go and talk to her. Despite the fact that Dawn is a direct cause of them all being trapped, and I guess she wouldn't know that she asked for it since it's a twist on her wish, but having her swear down that it had nothing to do with her just annoys me. I'm sitting there like, yes you fucking did, put two and two together, you want to be part of the gang, don't you? And we also do another I'm not a kid scene where Dawn contradicts a contradiction she made a few episodes ago. Look, I'm sick of this character, I really am. Let's move on to Buffy and Tara, who have built up a rather underrated friendship since her and Willow got together. Remember when they barely said two words to each other for an entire season? Well, not only does Buffy confide in Tara, she's invited to her birthday party because she's a friend, and not just Willow's girlfriend. It's important too, since she and Willow start talking again, and Tara shows a level of satisfaction with Willow's progress, although now Willow has to keep magic sober without a buffer. Halfrick returns and there's an odd interaction when she meets Spike.
William.
Hey, wait a minute.
What's this all about? Well, the show never explicitly states this outright, but remember back in Fool for Love, when we saw Spike's backstory with that girl, Cecily? It's her. Halfrick was Cecily, and she wasn't keen on Spike since she had a job to do. I like that it allows the viewers to connect the dots without flashing back or anything. It's something I definitely missed on my first watch. Clem returns to act as the comic relief character for the episode within all of the drama. The show has always needed that comic relief character to relieve the tension. It's a staple, and it's what helps make Buffy, Buffy. However, since all of our once comic relief characters have either matured, are part of the drama, or have moved on to the other show, Greenberg needed to bring in an emergency comic relief character.
Was he cute? I mean, I'm not a very good judge, but I think he seemed cute.
I think he seemed cute. Yeah.
Drew Greenberg has written an episode of the show before, which was Smash, the first in the mid-season two-parter, but he gets to develop his own storyline here, and while the drama doesn't feel very Buffy, the comedy certainly does. For example, I love the dumb loophole ending they give the story, with Halfrick having to lift the spell or she'll be trapped there too. It's a cool idea for a chill episode where 3/4 takes place in just the house, although we still get a bit of development regardless.
Buffy receives a letter from UC Sunnydale rejecting her application due to missing the deadline. Feeling down, she heads to work where Riley, of all people, shows up asking for her help in finding a Savolti demon. He looks much more war-torn with a nasty scar to boot. They find the monster through their flirting and come across Riley's wife? Yep, this is Sam, who met Riley after he left Sunnydale last season. Talk about a fast marriage. Buffy kills the demon much to Riley and Sam's annoyance, who forgot to tell her this was a capture mission. The Savolti demon can birth new offspring quickly and take over the town in no time at all. They've received intel that someone named the Doctor is the person harbouring these eggs before they hatch, and that's why Riley and Sam are here. Sam puts her foot in it by asking Willow to do some magic for them and apologises to her later when she's updated on the situation.
I've never met anyone with enough strength to quit before. I'm just saying.
Buffy heads to Spike's to see if he's heard anything about this Doctor until Riley shows up too, claiming that Spike is the Doctor. This is confirmed when a shit ton of eggs are found in Spike's basement, claiming that he's holding them for a friend. Buffy and Riley team up like old times and take out the hatching demons with a grenade blast, destroying Spike's basement in the process. Riley and Sam depart on good terms with everyone, and Buffy heads back to Spike to pretty much break up with him as she admits to him that she's been using him for these past few months, and it's time she moved on as she could never love him due to the fact he's still a demon at heart, with or without the chip. This is another episode that people cite as one of the worst of the show, mostly due to Riley's inclusion. I'm gonna say this here and now, since I've never really said it yet, I don't get the massive hate for Riley's character. I don't. We need to remember where Riley came from. Whedon brought him in to be the one for Buffy, the normal everyday likeable Joe she'd fall in love with, but people, originally mostly still bitter about Angel leaving, poured hatred into this character during his first season on the show. So the writers played into that, assassinating the character's appeal to write him out once they realised it wasn't going to work. Remember when they did a similar character assassination with Oz in season 4, but yet they gave him New Moon Rising later on to fix this departure and give the character a more satisfying conclusion, if albeit abrupt. This is Riley's New Moon Rising, bringing his character to a satisfying conclusion. Sam is written to be unhateable, mostly so the viewer understands why Riley has no motivation to return to Buffy, which he would most likely have done if Sam wasn't in the picture. Even when she messes up or says the wrong thing, she finds a way to solve the issue in no time at all, as opposed to every other character in the show at this moment. Ironic. The only other storyline in the episode is Xander and Anya making last-minute preparations for their wedding. They're doing rehearsals, their families are getting involved, and we'll see the result of all this planning next episode. Buffy cuts romantic ties with Spike here. She still likes him, but she's done sleeping with him. She wants to get out there and live her life again, which we see glimpses of throughout the episode and how Spike can get in the way as she misses the garbage truck among all her undone laundry because she's been up late sleeping with Spike and working shifts at the Doublemeat. She also gets rejected from college, which concludes any hope of Buffy's to continue her life the way it may have once been. Look, this is a fine end for Riley's character. I'm glad they did their best to try and fix the mess caused during Into the Woods. The episode itself is okay, if a bit tropey. It's this season's Xander episode, and it's Xander and Anya's wedding day, and both of their families are in town ready for the ceremony. Xander's very human family are mostly hostile towards the old Vengeance Demon colleagues of Anya's, who have turned out in spades for a wedding. Spike shows up with a date to make Buffy jealous, who's running around as Anya's maid of honour, keeping things in order. This becomes harder when an old man appears, taking Xander aside, claiming to be him from the future, and that he shouldn't marry Anya or else his life will be miserable. He takes out a crystal ball which shows glimpses of Xander's future with Anya, following the unknown circumstances surrounding Buffy's sudden death, which Xander sustained a back injury from, preventing him from doing any construction work, and he quickly becomes an alcoholic. Their two kids grow up to resent them, and when Anya tells Xander that she regrets marrying him, he hurls a pan at her before the vision suddenly ends. Needless to say, this really fucks with Xander, and he leaves before the ceremony even begins, which sends the rest of the gang into a panic, trying not to let Anya know so that she won't get upset on her special day. She eventually overhears it when Buffy's stalling becomes longer and longer, which causes a brawl to break out between the Montagues and Capulets. One of Xander's relatives points Anya in the direction of the older Xander as being the last person she saw and talked to, and Anya confronts him. As it turns out, this isn't Xander, but an old victim of one of Anya's vengeance spells who was turned into a demon and then transported to a hell dimension, who has come to seek revenge many years later, scaring off Xander only by showing visions of a possible scenario of how their marriage could play out, so that she is as pained as he is. Buffy attacks the demon, as does Xander, who reappears, and they kill it. Anya explains that what the demon showed Xander were fabricated visions, but the impact was felt, and Xander leaves telling her that he can't can't marry her. He departs to a hotel, spending the night away from the gang, while Anya is approached by de Hoffren to rejoin the Vengeance Demons out of sympathy for how far she's been emotionally reduced since her prime years as a demon. She accepts. So, yet another episode people don't like. We seem to be getting a lot of those this season, but there's a lot of justifiable reasons here as to why Xander leaves Anya at the altar, and as we'll soon come to know, he still wants to date Anya, just not marry her. Firstly, we've seen throughout the season moments where Xander might have been hesitant to marry Anya. The first big sign is how long he takes to announce it, even after Buffy gets back. He knows that once he tells everyone, it's too late to go back without disappointing his friends. We've seen him start minorly panicking when told that he's going to be spending the rest of his life with Anya. It was a matter of time. However, over the course of planning the wedding, Xander grew to understand that their wedding wasn't their marriage. It was one day to celebrate their relationship and then their lives continue. What really seals it is the demon who shows Xander the visions. However, a lot of people tend to forget this specific line which is key in understanding why Xander still walks at the end of the episode.
You'll see what I've seen, feel what I've felt.
Xander didn't just see these things, he lived them. He felt the hatred towards Anya and the sadness of losing Buffy and the pain, both physical and emotional, that these moments had on his mind and body. Xander effectively lived an unabridged version of his marriage with Anya, and although it wasn't real, it felt real to him. Let's remind ourselves too of where Xander came from.
On the brighter side, marriage has probably saved me from a nasty dose of the clap. Here's to you.
Yep, we finally meet the real Mr. Harris, who has been described over the course of the show as a sexist, discriminatory, violent alcoholic who has tortured Xander emotionally for years, probably through multiple forms of abuse. How does this demon strike true fear in Xander? Showing him to be like his father. I understand why Xander leaves Anya at the altar, and to be honest, a lot of people get mad at how this kind of reverses Xander's character, which I disagree with, but I think a lot of people should be far more angry at how this episode effectively ruins Anya. Not just ruins her, as in crying about it, but her character is as good as dead at this point. Oh yeah, she'll be around all the way to the end, but she's now back to being a vengeance demon. Her relationship with Xander is ruined, which the characters will quickly do a U-turn on next season when they realise they've fucked up any romance for his character, and trust me, he won't be the only one that happens to. There's still plenty of time to go, folks. Xander's family is by far the highlight of the episode, and even though his father is a pig, Uncle Rory is forever a legend.
Tell her what a funny guy I am, Donnie.
Gotta go. Enjoy the wedding.
A walking legend who we will never see again. I mentioned Spike brought a date to the wedding to make Buffy jealous, but he leaves early when he realises it isn't working, and it shows that the two aren't at each other's throats. Buffy still likes Spike, she just doesn't want to be involved with him anymore, and I'm content with this being the way they continue on. It's passive, and not at all over the top. However, give it time. A one-episode wonder now under Diego Gutierrez. He was Joss Whedon's personal assistant for the first 5 seasons of the show, before wishing to get his start as a writer, and I assume he came to Whedon with the idea of the episode, who allowed him to bring it to life as writing practice. While snooping around the trio's hideout, Andrew summons a demon that attacks Buffy, stabbing her with its claw, injecting a hallucinogenic liquid into her, which causes Buffy to have just that, hallucinations. She finds herself in a mental institution, where the entire show has been in her mind as she's a schizophrenic. A lot of shows do this trope, having the entire show be brought into question, but most of it is just ridiculous and played for laughs. Is that Joyce and Hank? God, the show isn't playing around with this idea, are they? No, we hear conversations that would be impossible for Buffy to hear in these visions, about how she was checked in around the time that the show started, even keeping her hair from season 1 as well, which is a great touch, and how she manufactured a sister into her world, as well as a brief period of lucidity while Buffy was canonically dead. In other news, the very real reality that totally isn't fake continues its story, where Xander returns from his stay at the hotel asking where Anya is, although the gang haven't seen her in a few days. Willow plans to surprise Tara after her class, although is deterred when she catches her kissing another girl. After an attack on patrol, Buffy tells the gang about what's happened to her, and they quickly get to work on how to reverse the effects. During this, Buffy admits to Willow about how when she first became the Slayer, she didn't hide it from her parents, who sent her to a mental facility for a few weeks when she began talking about vampires. However, when Buffy stopped talking about it all, they let her go, and her parents forgot about the whole debacle as the years passed. Buffy begins to wonder if she ever left the Institute as Spike and Xander hunt for the demon responsible, as it also happens to carry the antidote for his own poison. How convenient is that? They tie it up in the basement as Willow prepares said antidote. Dawn keeps Buffy company, but when Buffy has another attack where Joyce tries to convince Buffy that Dawn isn't real, Dawn takes personal offence to the fact that she isn't real in Buffy's hallucinations.
It's your ideal reality, and I'm not even a part of it.
fuck off. Willow gives Buffy the antidote and Spike appears to threaten Buffy out of the fucking blue to come back to him or either tell her friends about the relationship or he will. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but fuck off Spike. This has come out of absolutely nowhere. He seemed chilled about it last episode. What's this sudden jump in loneliness all about? This pushes Buffy to pour out the antidote, succumbing to the hallucinations, believing them to be the true reality. The Doctor tells her to destroy the things that she clings onto in her world and she will be set free. So she begins rounding up the gang in the basement, preparing to let the demon kill them all. Tara shows up suddenly and begins helping with magic before taking an absolutely classic tumble down the stairs thanks to Buffy. As Joyce pleads with Buffy to come back to her, Buffy becomes lucid and thanks her mother for helping her make her choice, saying goodbye? Yep, she comes back to reality as another antidote is quickly made to cure the hallucinations, and all's well that ends well.
I'm sorry, there's no reaction at all.
Wait.
I'm afraid we lost.
Why are we back in the hallucinations? Are you serious? We're ending in the fucking hallucinations? What is this, Saint Elsewhere? Yep, the ending was intentionally left that way so that the viewer could come to their own conclusions about whether the show was real or not. Huh, I wonder if the writer stuck by this ending or not. Both Whedon and Noxon have said that these are hallucinations and not the actual reality of the show. While Whedon opened up about having fun with the idea as a harmless joke at the viewer's expense, Noxon was adamant that the viewer should disregard the ending and not even think twice about it. I guess this is what you get when you put a first-time writer in charge of such a mind-bending episode. I see the hallucinations as a metaphor for Buffy's detachment from her life. Since returning from heaven, she's coped with it in many different ways, and although admitting to Willow that she wanted to go on living and gone, she still slept with Spike and searched for anything that might have gone wrong with the spell to make her feel better about emotionally dying. You know, she initially wants to give up when she finally sees a way out from the mess of a season she's found herself in. But like she said to Willow, she does actually want to keep on going, and so she turns her back on the hallucinations, coming back to reality, ready to continue living, although she still has to worry about Spike being a dick. The trio are back, finally. It's only been about 4 episodes. I guess they were laying low after killing Katrina. They serve as background characters in this episode, as the only scene of any real note is when Jonathan questions what's in some boxes that Warren and Andrew are holding, but Warren shrugs him off. Tara is seen kissing a girl, and Willow decides that asking her out again is a bad idea, quietly raging to herself as she distracts her mind while helping Buffy. Anya is nowhere to be seen in this episode, having disappeared after the wedding, which doesn't help Xander's confidence that they can continue a relationship following this. I actually do like this episode, even for its confusing ending. The only other thing I'd like to note before we move on is this line of Spike's, which I'm almost convinced James Marsters flubs, and even quietly acknowledges he did, but yet they still kept it in. You tell me.
Might actually have to be happy if you did. They'd either understand and help you, God forbid.
The trio were chasing a few vampires through the cemetery when they come across Buffy, who ends up having an altercation with Spike about still not telling her friends that they slept together. While Buffy is just as done with his shit as I am, the trio manage to grab a disc that the vampires dropped and they flee back to their lair. Willow heads back to the college to meet Tara after class, where she finds out that the girl Tara was kissing was just a friend, and the two make arrangements to catch up, possibly continuing their relationship if all goes well. Xander mopes around his apartment as Anya is still MIA until he comes back from work and finds her in his apartment where the two have it out. Xander wants to continue the relationship, just not as a married couple, but Anya isn't having it. She attempts to curse him without him knowing, but a loophole in vengeance spells prevent her from seeking vengeance on her own behalf. She storms out and attempts to get the other members of the gang to curse Xander in some way so that she can wreak vengeance. However, none of them wish any harm on either of them. Buffy spends more time with Dawn, taking her shopping and making dinner. However, what Dawn actually wants to do is go patrolling with Buffy, which Buffy isn't too keen on, and she rejects the idea. Tara and Willow catch up, and Buffy and Anya have one of those vengeance-seeking conversations I mentioned earlier, and Xander shows up at the last minute. In frustration that Anya won't talk to him, he kicks a nearby garden gnome which unveils a once hidden camera. The gang suspects Spike for some fucking reason, and Buffy confronts him. It's not him, of course, but Spike does have an interesting comment to say about the way he feels about Buffy.
The way I feel about you. It's different. And no matter how hard you try to convince yourself it isn't, it's real.
Buffy returns home, where Willow begins tracing the camera through the internet to see where it's outputting its feed, when they discover that there are actually cameras situated in all of their usual haunts. At the magic box, Spike shows up and begins to share his problems with Anya and Jack Daniels.
It's no wonder they couldn't deal with the likes of you and me, love. We should have been dead hundreds of years ago. And we're the only ones who are really alive.
Great line. Their drunkenness leads to them finding solace in each other by sleeping with each other. Is this a love pentagon now? Right at that moment, Willow uncovers the hidden camera in the magic box, and both Buffy and Xander get the whole show. Buffy gets some air outside where she tells Dawn about her and Spike's relationship. Willow informs Buffy that Xander's left with an axe from her weapons chest, and she hurries to the store, where Xander attempts to kill Spike. Anya and Xander continue to argue about who's in the wrong, and Xander tells her that he's disgusted she would ever sleep with Spike.
It's good enough for Buffy.
Shut up and leave her out of...
Buffy.
Oh yep, Spike lets Xander and Anya in on Buffy's little love affair, which disgusts Xander even further and he storms off. Even though this is all incredibly depressing that these relationships are breaking down, the final scene is spent with Tara and Willow, where Tara tells Willow that she doesn't want to build trust with her again, but that she just wants to continue where they left off.
Can we just skip it? Can you just be kissing me now?
Great watch. One of my favourites of the season without a doubt. The trio continue their evil schemes by stealing a disc at the start of the episode which aids them in finding a particular object in the next episode. Warren and Andrew then are revealed to plan to betray Jonathan since he's not exactly on board with a lot of their more evil ideas. Jonathan remains oblivious and continues to help them even though he can just leave at any point if he doesn't agree with anything they're doing. The cameras they planted back in Life serial are still operational and allows the Entropy to continue as this love pentagon flourishes in the final third of the episode. Nicholas Brendan is superb in this episode. He's never been the best actor in the world, but this episode really pushes him to his limits, and he performs excellently throughout. He finds out about Spike and Buffy's relationship, as does Dawn, who is the first person Buffy actively tells, not counting Tara, who she just blurted it out to. It shows that Buffy was preempting to tell the rest of the gang, but thanks to Spike, that gets thrown out the window. Dawn is much more tolerable here now that she's on good terms with Buffy, but it won't last long. Seriously, the finale is going to send me in a frenzy with how annoying she is, but for now I will remain content. Tara and Willow make up, sleeping together at the end of the episode. Well, it's nice that someone gets a happy ending, right? Tara and Willow enjoy each other's company in bed following their reconciliation the previous night, and Tara tells Willow about Buffy sleeping with Spike, which Willow is hurt by since Buffy never said anything. Dawn finds out about them getting back together in the hall.
I love you guys!
Buffy breaks into the trio's lair where they aren't, except saw blades are, and they destroy the place, with Buffy only scraping out with a few papers and discs of their plans. Okay, I know the trio's shtick is that they're over the top, but these saw blades are so ridiculous. How's the house not taking any structural damage? Dawn visits Spike, who's currently coming to terms with the fact that he's probably lost Buffy forever now that everyone knows about their secret. She tells Spike that one day she is willing to forgive him, but that she's disappointed that Spike hurt Buffy when he claims to love her, citing that maybe it isn't really love if he's capable of doing something like that. The trio used the disc from last episode to find the location of the Orbs of Nezlacan, which render the holder great strength. Warren hogs them, of course, and he heads to the bronze to show off. Xander has an argument with Buffy, who appears at his apartment to reconcile. He feels betrayed by her relationship with Spike, not because she never told him, but because she forgot what Spike really is. Evil. The only thing stopping him from turning on them all is his chip, which we've seen evidence of throughout the season. Buffy finds Xander hypocritical in his high almighty judgment of her, considering he betrayed Anya at the altar, and Xander storms out as a result. He also heads to the bronze, running into Warren, who makes a scene, beating Xander up in the process, only not finishing the job because Jonathan reminds him of their upcoming plan, whatever that may be. Buffy, injured from her patrol earlier that night, runs herself a bath when Spike shows up and tries to convince Buffy that he's worth loving under it all, by attempting to rape her. No, I'm fucking serious, and it's uncomfortably hard to watch too. This is the infamous scene of the episode, the infamous scene of the season, and we'll talk a hell of a lot about it after the plot synopsis, believe me. Buffy manages to launch Spike off of her and he attempts to apologise.
Ask me again why I could never love you.
He runs off, and Xander arrives, noticing that Spike has left his jacket. When he finds Buffy bruised, he, and I'm going to use my favourite phrase here again, puts two and two together. Willow shows up too and announces that she and Tara have found something about the trio's plans in the documents Buffy took from their lair. They're going to steal a bunch of money, what a surprise. Spike returns to his crypt getting a paid a visit by Clem, and the two share a conversation where Spike laments that the chip prevents him from being neither a vampire nor a man. Clem tells Spike that things can change, and this pushes Spike to take charge of his own future, hopping on a motorbike to take off for God knows where.
Get nice and comfy, Slayer. I'll be back. And when I do, things are gonna change.
Buffy confronts the trio at the amusement park they plan to rob and finds Warren super strong, unable to incapacitate him. Jonathan leaps on Buffy's back, letting her in on the secret of the orbs, and she follows his instructions.
Say goodnight, bitch.
Good night, bitch.
Warren uses a jetpack to escape, as does Andrew. Never mind. Andrew and Jonathan are escorted to jail, Jonathan now aware that both Andrew and Warren plan to betray him. I'm sure they're going to have a fun stay together after that. The next day, as Willow and Tara finally prepare to spend the day together doing things that don't involve a bedroom, Buffy and Xander make up in the backyard, as Xander acknowledges that Buffy didn't say anything because he probably would have reacted negatively, and that wasn't what she needed at that point. Suddenly Warren reappears, this time with a gun, and in a desperate act of revenge for Buffy ruining his plans, he shoots at her frantically. Bullets fly, including a stray bullet which...
Your shirt.
Xander discovers that Buffy has been shot while completely oblivious that Tara's been shot dead just upstairs from them. Willow's eyes turn to that familiar magic tint of black with a hint of red to boot, and the fucking episode ends. Where to begin? The bathroom scene. This scene was such a nightmare to prepare to film that it still haunts James Marsters to this day. A lot of people scream that it's out of character for Spike to do such a thing to someone he loves, while you have the other side claiming that it's completely in character given how they've been insinuating the evilness beneath him all season. One thing that seems to be agreed upon by nearly the entire fan base is that this scene was a mistake, and a step too far. A jump the gun moment, so to speak. What do I think of it? Well, back in my season 3 video I mentioned during the episode Beauty and the Beasts that the show would tackle abuse again in a much more effective way. This is what I was talking about. And for Spike's character, I absolutely love this scene. I know how that sounds, but this is exactly what the viewer needed to see to convince them that Spike was still pure evil, which some people still can't quite grasp even after this. Exploring such an abhorrent act with a beloved character is so intriguing. He's the only main character capable of such a thing, at least in our eyes. How can Spike possibly come back from this? Well, since he seems to be pretty pissed when he leaves at the end of the episode, the viewer can assume he's off to get his chip removed. We'll see bits of his adventure over the next few episodes. On to the trio now, who I was just starting to get annoyed by due to their over-the-top antics not really blending well with the rest of the season's feel. But here we find it was done on purpose. Warren is just as evil as any other big bad we've had before, yet there's something that makes him slightly more terrifying than the rest. He's 100% human, yet every other big bad has either been a vampire, part demon, or a god. Warren is none of those. He's just a despicable human being. That's why he's so hated by the fan base, and justifiably so. There's nothing that gives him the right to do this to the gang, yet he does. I think they play Warren off incredibly well to get to this point. Adam Bush is an excellent actor as showcased by his desperation in that final scene. Fun fact, or I guess not too fun, but Adam Bush was actually dating Amber Benson at the time of this episode, so he actually killed his real girlfriend on screen. That segues us right into Tara's death. Now this was a mistake. Even Joss Whedon agrees this was a mistake. Forgetting the bury your gaze trope that a lot of people point to, even for Willow's character, this sucks. I love a good shocking death as much as the next avid television viewer, but only when it doesn't ruin another character's story arc. The writers attempt to move on from Tara next season, and due to other reasons that involved Amber Benson not returning for the show in season 7, they realised that Willow was going to end up alone for the series finale. So they rush in a terrible replacement for Tara, who is a universally disliked character. However, we'll get to that when we get to it. I like that they added Amber Benson to the opening credits for the episode, just as an appreciation for her work on the show, as well as another classic Buffy subversion. Joyce's death was a shocking moment that didn't directly affect Buffy's ending. If anything, it helped her grow. This is the opposite. Tara's death leads Willow to go full dark mode for the remainder of the season, but aside from that, I really wish they didn't do this. I really wish they didn't do this. Summing up though, does this episode disappoint at points? Yes. However, it's nowhere near as horrendous as a lot of people say it is. Is there a good reason that Stephen DeKnight never wrote another episode of the show? Yes, and I know that when a writer writes an episode that they aren't the only one who helped come up with the overarching storylines of that particular episode. However, in one season, this man wrote a Dawn episode and 2 episodes involving rape. Goodbye, Stephen S. DeKnight. No thank you. Now go into Angel and attempt to help ruin that show. As the paramedics arrive and take Buffy away to the hospital, Willow attempts to resurrect Tara. However, since she was killed by non-supernatural means and she's already brought back another life recently, she is denied the ability to bring Tara back. After a brief interaction with Xander, who tells her it was Warren, she plans to exact revenge on him, heading to the magic box, absorbing all of the dark magics from the restricted section, becoming what most fans have named Dark Willow. Warren, meanwhile, is at a demon bar, flexing about his killing of the Slayer. However, they tell him that they heard about it on the news and that she survived his shooting. I don't really understand this part, as Buffy is not out of the clear at this point in the episode, and it only happened like an hour ago at the very most. So are they fucking with Warren? Anyway, Warren begins to shit his pants and runs to Rack for help, who tells him that his biggest concern right now isn't Buffy, but Willow, since he killed Tara. Warren is confused, but is willing to take any magic that Rack is willing to give to him to find a way to escape Sunnydale as soon as possible. Buffy is rushed into emergency surgery, which isn't going well until Willow shows up, and she obtains the bullet via magical means, saving Buffy's life shortly after she flatlines. Yet, believe it or not, Buffy technically dies a 3rd time here, although the show never really counts it. While they're not exactly happy that Willow is using magic again, if it wasn't for her, Buffy would be dead. Willow forces him to come with her to hunt down Warren, who's currently on a bus out of town. The gang manage to find the bus, and Willow has Warren step off of it, squeezing his it's a robot. Willow is tricked by Warren's old tricks, which she wasn't expecting. She begins to storm off again to find Warren, but the gang tell her that there's no point since Buffy is fine. Willow tells him about Tara's death and that she plans to kill Warren for his crime. She disappears and Buffy and Xander head back home, where they find Dawn curled up in the corner of the room watching Tara's dead body, since she came home from school hours ago Willow and no one thought of telling her considering how busy they were. The coroner arrives and takes Tara's body away, and apparently the police left shortly before him. The gang plan to go after Willow before she kills Warren, not allowing their friend to cross a line that's far further than anything the gang have ever done before. Dawn insists that if she can't go with them, that she stays with Spike at his crypt. Xander objects to this, and Spike attempted to rape Buffy last episode, but Buffy gives in considering Spike can't hurt Dawn. But as you know, Spike isn't there. Instead they find Clem, who promises to take care of Dawn. Xander goes to the magic box, discovering Anya, who was present when Willow sucked the magic books dry, and Xander learns that Anya is a vengeance demon again. Anya surprisingly agrees to help the gang, putting their differences aside for Willow's sake. This relationship has come a hell of a long way since Triangle. The gang follow Anya's scent of vengeance as Willow hunts Warren down in the woods on the outskirts of town. She captures him, torturing both physically and psychologically. Warren eventually tries to apologise, citing Tara's death as purely accidental, forgetting the fact that he also attempted to kill another relation of Willow's. Right as the gang come across Willow and Warren, Willow kills him, skinning the top half of his body clean off. As the gang watches on in horror, Willow turns to them and says,
"One down."
Forgiving this episode of a few plot holes which I'll get into in a second. This is another enjoyable watch. Seriously, I've been on the edge of my seat at points through these, and I know what's going to happen too. The big thing I should talk about is Spike, who does make an appearance in the episode for one scene, showing him in Africa initiating a set of trials with a mysterious demon in a cave, which if Spike passes, will return him to his past self. Now, it's not possible for Spike to have made it to Africa in such a short time span, considering he's only been out of town for one day, and he's already made it around the world into the middle of nowhere Africa. These scenes have actually taken place following the conclusion of the season, most likely shortly before the next season. We'll catch up with him some more next episode. We also get a brief scene with Jonathan and Andrew, who have no idea the storm that's headed their way, as they're too busy arguing over Andrew's attempted betrayal. That being said, Andrew seems to be returning to normal following Warren's departure. Without his influence around, Andrew is more or less a normal guy. Tara's death is subject to questioning. Are the police going to question about her murder? What do the gang tell them about Warren? Do they tell them about Warren? I suppose it doesn't really matter and you can headcanon the explanation, but it's just a little nitpick I have. Speaking of Tara's death, Willow becomes the big bad for these last 3 episodes as she takes out Warren, our previous big bad, in no time at all, showing how powerless he really was in the grand scheme. And since Willow is a character we know well, who's also a pure human who kills another pure human, there's an interesting parallel to draw between the two of them there. Willow is probably the most dangerous foe they've faced thus far, simply because the gang can't just kill her. They have to bring her back from whatever hell she's drug herself into following her absorption of the books. I love this arc, personally, however I wish they committed to Willow going evil further. I'll explain more about what I mean soon, but let's move on. So it's race against time. Anya teleports to Jonathan and Andrew as Willow will take time to get there at her magic level and updates them on what's happened, and attempts to get the guard to let them out. Willow shows up at the station and begins pulling the wall apart to get to the duo, however Buffy has managed to get them out in time and Anya is left standing up to Willow. Yet Buffy got there in time and sneaked the duo out of the station in a police car stolen by Xander. Willow is hot on their trail, taking control of a truck to try and run them off the road, however this takes up a lot of energy and drained she loses control of the truck. Meanwhile in the B plot you really don't give two shits about, Dawn convinces Clem to let her help her sister and they hunt down Rack's place, which Willow took Dawn to once not too long ago in an attempt to find her there. Thing is, Willow is there and got her energy back by sucking Rack dry of all magic and life, killing him. Willow threatens Dawn and that she'll turn her back into the ball of energy she once was if she doesn't stop being annoying.
Well, I'll be a lot happier without listening to the constant whining.
Willow, stop.
Mom, Buffy, Tara.
Willow...
I almost married you just now.
Buffy appears in time, following Dawn's same thought process, where Willow continues to talk the big talk. Back at the magic box, Xander and Anya attempt to put their problems with each other aside to translate a protection spell to put on Jonathan and Andrew to prevent Willow from killing them, with mixed results. Xander's beginning to doubt his own capabilities following his breakup with Anya, Buffy getting shot, Tara dying and Willow going bad. He's been unable to do anything to stop these things from happening, or in some cases actively assisted in making these things happen, unbeknownst to him at the time of course. Suddenly Willow teleports herself, Buffy and Dawn from Rack's place to the magic box, which like Anya said, did take some time, and it seems to be enough time as when she attempts to kill Jonathan and Andrew, the protection spell is in place and prevents her from doing so. As Buffy takes Willow on, Xander flees with Dawn, Jonathan and Andrew, leaving Anya to continue suppressing Willow's magic with a chance she's whispering out of sight. Andrew turns on Xander however, Jonathan keeps him in line. Willow discovers Anya and takes care of her, restoring her to full strength and knocking Buffy down too.
And there's no one in the world who has the power to stop me now.
I'd like to test that theory.
Giles fucking shows up. I love that reveal so much. He temporarily incapacitates Willow just so that he can catch up with Buffy on what's been going on and vice versa. He was alerted about a powerful and dangerous force arising by an English coven, probably working with the council, and they gave him some magics to take it on, only aware it was Willow when he arrived, although he had his suspicions if you remember the kitchen scene. Buffy updates him on the hell he left behind.
And I've been sleeping with Spike.
Rumour has it that Anthony's head initial laugh was a blooper that the crew loved so much they promptly rewrote the scene on the spot to include it. Willow escapes, however, and takes Giles on in a magic fight. Xander, frustrated with Dawn trying to make out that Spike would help them in this scenario, drops the bombshell about his attempted rape on Buffy. That promptly shuts her up. Back at the destroyed magic box, Willow forms a fireball to track Jonathan and Andrew down in an attempt to kill them without even having to find them. Buffy runs off to try and get to them first, while Willow pretty much mops the floor with Giles. She absorbs his power similar to what she did with Rack. However, something is very different this time. She doesn't just feel her own pain anymore, she feels the pain of every other being on the planet, completely blowing her mind in a negative way, of course. This pushes her to end their suffering by ending the fucking world, and she sets off to do so. Buffy tries to warn the gang about the fireball while they're trying to find a place to hide in the cemetery, and it causes Buffy and Dawn to fall in a massive hole it creates, getting knocked out. Xander is also knocked out on a headstone, which leaves Jonathan and Andrew to escape to Mexico. They all come to, the sun having risen, and Xander is sent to find some rope to help Buffy and Dawn escape the hole. Anya, who was knocked out by Willow earlier, finds a near-dead Giles, who manages to tell her where Willow is going, to a place named Kingman's Bluff, where a buried temple resides under the ground, which once powered will initiate Armageddon. That's all very convenient, but I guess it's a hellmouth. She updates Buffy and Dawn, which Xander overhears, and he sets out to find Willow on the cliffside. Meanwhile, back in the hole, Dawn gets mad at Buffy for not immediately telling her she was raped and that Giles is back. Fuck off. Buffy seems upset about Giles being near death, which seems like a normal reaction for her to have, but next season will change this exponentially. A group of monsters made from the earth of the hole begin to appear, and Buffy allows Dawn to do what she's been pissing and moaning to do for 2 seasons now. Join in. Xander approaches Willow and begins professing his love for her. Even though she's ending the world, there's no one he'd rather be with than her during such an occasion. He still loves her regardless of her actions, and this eventually wears Willow down to the point that she collapses in his arms, returning to her normal self. Giles, who came so ridiculously close to death again, is now completely fine, and he informs Anya that the magic the Coven gave him was the pure essence of magic. He knew that Willow would probably overpower him and take it, so the magic would tap into what humanity was still within her, allowing Xander to make the connection and save the world. In the hole, Buffy begins to cry when the earth monsters disappear.
Sorry to disappoint you.
Are you serious? She finally did what you want and you still want to pick fights? Christ almighty, how can anyone defend this character? Buffy reassures her now that she no longer wants to return to heaven and that she's ready to go back out and start being the Slayer once again. They climb out of the hole and take a lovely stroll through the meadows while Xander comforts Willow, Anya helps Giles out of the now wrecked magic box, and Andrew and Jonathan escape to Mexico. I'm excited for that spin-off. Throughout the episode, Spike began his trials and managed to conquer them all. He is rewarded at the end of the episode by being returned to his old self.
We will return your soul.
Oh yeah. That's one hell of an ending. Obviously Spike is subject of Buffy subversion here, making you think that he's off to fight for his chip to be removed, but is actually fighting for his soul back so he can be to Buffy what he couldn't be before, someone she can stand to be with. Even James Marsters wasn't aware of this. That scene where he threatens Buffy on the hilltop before driving off, he was told that Spike was going to get his chip removed, so they ensured that you didn't have a clue as to what he was going to do. This is actually one of my favourite season finales of the show, and it's the only one not to be written by Joss Whedon, so what does that say about the quality of some of these other veteran writers of the show? Let's go through the other characters now. Giles returns for the last episode, and my god, it's so good to see him again. That being said, he is around for about 15 minutes, and then lies down doing nothing for the last 25. He's the same old Giles though, even admitting to Buffy that leaving when he did was a mistake, and he regrets doing it. I guess that's the writer's way of dealing with that moment, and I can forgive Giles' character for it. I wouldn't call it a character-ruining event by any stretch. Trust me, the way they'll treat Giles next season will actually make you wish they killed him off here. And to segue into that point, I wouldn't have minded seeing the show do that here. Obviously Tara was killed only a few episodes earlier, so they might have been a bit hesitant to kill another off so soon, especially one as beloved, but this was the absolute perfect moment to do it if you were going to do it. His relationship with Buffy is still intact, and he seems happy. Plus, this would have been an incredibly interesting burden for Willow to live with next season. Killing Giles? It would give her a much needed redemption arc over the course of the final season, leading to some form of satisfying resolution. Let's move on to Willow, who works really well as a villain here. She's initially motivated by something that a lot of viewers can get behind, however, that switch, showing her trying to destroy the world simply because a part of her humanity wanted to put everyone out of their misery, shows how distant she actually is from rhyme or reason. She's actually another character I wouldn't have minded getting killed off here. Since they have to bring her to a rushed and far less satisfying conclusion at the end of next season, having her unite with Tara in the afterlife would be a nice closure for her character. They could have even had her realise that she's gone too far when Xander snaps her out of it and she has to kill herself to save the world, similar to when Angel had to die at the end of season 2, or even Doyle's sacrifice in Angel to some extent. It beats the attempt to reverse the effects of Tara's death that they actually do, giving her a relationship that has absolute stinker in the chemistry department compared to her and Tara. Tara was a character that had a sufficient enough amount of development for me to feel satisfied when she was killed, that we weren't missing any more potential for storylines. However, since it's so obvious that there was more they wanted to do with Willow in that department, I'm ultimately left unsatisfied. If you know what I'm saying. I'm not disappointed that Tara was killed off, but that she was killed off when it was clear the writers didn't know what they were going to do next season and threw it in as a twist. It's exciting, sure, but ultimately pointless. It does allow Willow to go dark, but like I mentioned before, there were other ways to conclude this story that didn't end up undermining what she had with Tara. Taking a small detour back to Spike, there's a character that had a superb season. He finally gets what he's always wanted, Buffy's undying affection, but it comes at a price, being used for convenience, yet he's fallen so far in love with her that he doesn't care that she doesn't love him, or that she isn't interested in him in a relationship manner as long as he can fuck her. It's not until he tries to be the one to initiate it and it backfires, the bathroom scene where he has that epiphany that he can never be someone that Buffy can love. Further conversations with Clem push him to do what no other vampire has done before, fight for his soul back, voluntarily. Jonathan and Andrew are characters I won't talk about for too long, mainly because we will see them both again next season, and one of them, the wrong one, will end up working with the gang for a large portion of it. I like Jonathan, he still has a sense of right and wrong, and it's nice to have a familiar face around when all the weird shit's going down. While some characters may be unrecognisable, he's still Jonathan. I always felt sorry for him in that scene in the magic box where he tries to help the gang but they keep telling him to shut up and sit down. He didn't kill Tara, he never killed Katrina, yet he was the one who harboured all of the guilt for these actions since no one else would. Andrew's another character I actually like. He doesn't do much to like this season, but next season is a different story. He's a hated character in the fanbase, but I found myself quite entertained by his bickerings with Jonathan and the relatability of his easily swayed influence via Warren. There's always hints that he was in love with Warren, and I could see that being so. Do they ever explore Andrew as being an openly gay character? No, and that's a shame. Anya finds herself going from human in love to being a single demon, helping the gang out of concern for Willow, a character she once hated. I think they take a step back with her here. Sure, she sticks around for the entirety of next season, but they do stall with what to do with her. This relationship that she has with Xander is the only one that the writers could feasibly continue for her, instead of starting fresh. It's yet another thing that the show will do a U-turn on in the final season. Xander is a character who seems the most put together at the beginning of the season, yet soon becomes the most self-doubting of them all at the end. He couldn't stop everything from going wrong before, so how can he possibly help stop it from getting worse? So, he saves the world, in a great scene that shows he's a compassionate guy, who's willing to put himself in the line of fire to save lives. Yeah, alright, we've already seen him doing it in the Zeppo, but it's a reminder that the viewer definitely needs. I find myself seriously disappointed at the amount of hate this character gets, because his development is so far detached from who he starts out as, yet most of it is portrayed subtly. His humour and questionable approach to women is a defence mechanism from how fragile his ego is due to being abused throughout his childhood by his father, while having a mother who didn't seem to bat an eye at this treatment. It's a miracle Xander came out as good as he was in the end, and the last thing he wants to be like is his father. He's married, so Xander can't be. All it took was to live through a radically altered vision of his future, and he wanted to call the whole thing off and go back to just being Anya's boyfriend. He could handle being her fiancé because he never experienced his father as that. Oh, seriously, how richly written is this character? And just because he makes a few jokes about women and isn't the perfect human being, the majority of the fanbase slaughters him to pieces. However, when characters like Willow or Buffy make radical mistakes, or to give a few problematic examples, when Buffy makes fun of a Jamaican accent,
I think we might make him.
or Cordelia uses the R word 1 billion times over her course on both shows,
Of course, you look like a retard.
it's just seen as jokes of their time. On your next rewatch, reset your feelings for Xander. Watch his reactions to jokes at his own expense progress over the show, and how selfless he can really be for someone who stresses about his own self-confidence constantly. Dawn is the opposite. This is a character who gets hate and deserves every bit of it. There's always writing a younger character to create needless drama to put into respect of how small her problems are in comparison, but here it comes across as self-important and egotistical. These are traits to dislike in a character. Dawn hasn't saved the world. Dawn wasn't abused as a child, or neglected. Fair enough, there's a part of her that looks up to her sister like any younger sibling, and she wants to be like her, fighting evil and such. Buffy finally gives her that chance in the final episode, and how does she repay this? She goes back to instantly acting like Buffy doesn't want to be in her vicinity. She just gave you permission to stand next to her in fucking battle, and you're acting like she broke your Barbie doll. Fuck off! Seriously, how bad did the writers want to fuck up her character? Because I said it back in my season 5 video, but I was quite taken aback by how perfectly fine her character was in that season. She felt balanced, and when she reacted badly, it was justified. She was even alright at the start of this season, but around the halfway point, she takes a kamikaze nosedive that she never comes back from. Very sad. Buffy is a troubled character from start to finish. She's resurrected from heaven and has to learn how to cope with that. She thinks about ending her own life, sleeping with a creature she should hate just to feel something, until finally she she learns to live again. That's her quest over the season, to learn how to live again. I think the storyline is paced and executed brilliantly. Sarah Michelle Gellar was really into this arc at the beginning, however a few missteps like the balcony and bathroom scenes made her quite fed up with the role. Next season, there are points that it's so obvious her heart wasn't in this character anymore. I'm at least glad she gave the show a chance to resolve properly instead of just giving it up here, but we'll go into season 7 at a later date. Season 6 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer is an interesting one, to say the least. There are points when I feel like I know how I feel about it, and then I get about halfway through and begin to question myself. I was really into the first half of the season, itching to move on to the next episode. However, I found the latter half quite challenging at points, despite the fact that a lot of the singular plots to specific episodes were actually some of the strongest that the show ever did. It's because of this that this season finds itself in an annoyingly abstract limbo state for me. Is it good TV? In my opinion, yes. Does it get on my nerves a lot? Also yes, but to be honest, the best shows do. My favourite episode of the season has to be Once More with Feeling. By the end of the season you'll probably have forgotten that this one was even in here, but it's an iconic and historic moment in TV history, and of course all the songs are fantastic. My least favourite episode has to be All the Way. Dawn has never been my favourite character, as I'm no doubt you're aware, and giving her an entire episode to do nothing in is really upsetting. This season holds some of the most memorable and greatest moments and character arcs that they ever did. It's a hell of a season, but I find that it holds up as a strong addition to the show's seasonal repertoire. So what comes next? Sarah Michelle Gellar's contract is up at the end of next season, and she announces to the world that the next season will be her last. It's time for the show to end. But the important question is it an ending worthy of such a legendary and landmark show?